Hello, everyone. I am going to talk today about the BBC. Given that recently Boris Johnson has put them under threat, looking to make the TV license a subscription type service, I believe is what they're referring to it as. And I wanted to look at this report because when I see BBC articles, my view is the BBC are so biased towards the left. It's ridiculous. They're so anti-Brexit. Ridiculous. Like they're supposed to be impartial. But I was speaking to a Labour supporting friend of mine. He's quite open-minded, so I don't mind. And he agreed with me. Except he said that he was sharing articles and talking about how the BBC is so biased towards the right wing. And they're so pro-Brexit. And I began to wonder whether or not both sides are just seeing the articles that disagree with them. Now, everyone is subject to confirmation bias. It's extremely difficult to be vigilant about. And it's quite easy to fall prey to, quite easy to end up not noticing the things that contradict what you think. But I found this study done by the BMG. It was a poll, I believe. Simply trying to find out, is the BBC biased? And I think the results were quite interesting. So, most of the respondents apparently didn't have a view on the subject. But more importantly, this is where it gets interesting. If you look at the leftmost column, that's the BBC. But the interesting thing is that if you look at the other columns as well, Channel 4, Sky News, ITV, and Russia Today. Less so with Russia Today, actually. Russia Today is the only one that breaks that trend, which is quite interesting. So, if you look at that, most of the audiences for BBC, Channel 4, Sky News, and ITV say that they're politically neutral and balanced. But then there's this kind of tapered off percentage on both sides. There's a small percentage that say they're somewhat biased or strongly biased towards left wing. And there's also another percentage that say they're somewhat biased and strongly biased towards the right wing. I'm ignoring the ones who said they don't know because they don't know, so that's not really an answer. I do find it interesting there that Russia Today are strongly biased towards left-wing views. I wouldn't have thought that, but I guess I don't really read much Russia Today. I would assume they were right-wing, but I don't know where I got that idea, to be honest. Maybe it's just a bad assumption on my part. So, according to the study, more people see the BBC as having a left-wing bias than a right-wing, but only marginally. I believe I did look up another bias, the bias checking website. I don't really know how legit it is, but they said that the BBC has a centre-left bias. But I do find it interesting that both sides of the political aisle, I assume, because this study doesn't actually doesn't seem to have asked what views those people had. So the study doesn't really go into detail. I'll check the data sheet later on and see if they did ask the respondents how they politically aligned, because I'd be very interested to see whether or not the right wing people were the ones saying that it was biased left wing, and the left wing was saying it's biased right wing. That would be my assumption. It's on the basis of that assumption I'd like to propose an idea. And this is just one I've just been thinking about for about a year or so. And it might not be a good idea. I'd love to have a discussion about it, just see whether or not it would actually work. I wouldn't want to put it into practice just because but basically, my view is the fact that BBC's made the rod for their own back. They've set themselves out to be politically neutral, to be, balanced, impartial, all that kind of stuff. And I just kind of look at that and I'm thinking, I mean, yes, a good journalist should make sure that everything's factual and stated, but it's really difficult, if not impossible, to avoid a bias. And even if you avoid a bias, or you can at least check the bias and try and make it balanced, the viewers and listeners will still see you as biased because of their own confirmation bias. Even if you're checking yourself, you can't check the listeners and the viewers. But what you can do is make sure that the viewers know your bias beforehand. So I had this idea a while back about splitting the BBC in two and forming a left-wing and a right-wing BBC. I have no idea how this would work, to be honest. It's a very rough idea. But I just thought, they've got something like this in America. They've got, I'm pretty sure Fox News is actually the only right-wing news broadcaster, and there's a whole bunch of left-wing ones. But still, there's that Fox News are right-wing. You know to expect news from them, right-wing news from them, and left-wing news from MSNBC and various other ones. So I had this idea then, if you split them into, then you have a right-wing BBC and a left-wing BBC. You wouldn't read a right-wing BBC article and go, "Oh my gosh, they're so right-wing." Of course they're right-wing. What were you expecting? But what it would mean is that people would then have an option to read the same story from two different points of views. And typically that is the best way. And I think that would actually help balance it out. Usually that is the way a lot of people suggest balancing things out. Ben Shapiro and Sargon of Akkad, they also say, make sure you read sources from the other side. Make sure you look up information of the other people. Don't just stay in an echo chamber. Don't get stuck with your own side. You need to listen to what the other people are saying. Otherwise, you won't understand other points of views. And I think even John Stuart Mill said that he who understands only his own side of the argument understands not even that. So I do think it could be worth creating a sort of duality, two BBCs. Obviously, there'd be problems with funding, and there'd be problems with other sort of non-news television. Maybe you just separate the BBC news side, and you can just keep the BBC TV shows together. But then you've got the whole problem where there was political, let's call it propaganda, in various BBC TV shows. Doctor Who had it. That's the only one that actually comes to mind because I don't really watch any other BBC shows. But I've seen it on quite a few, to be honest. I've heard of quite a few having this kind of stuff, and I think that you probably would have a problem there. But on the basis of at least the news, the articles and the reporting, I do think you could probably solve a lot of problems if you just remove the rod that's up their back and allow them to just not have to be impartial, allow them to have two sides. And I think that could probably help. But I might be wrong. This is just like it's a concept. It's a inkling of an idea. Anyway, I wanted to share that thought, and I want to share the poll. I'll leave a link to it in the description so you can read over it yourself. And if I do find anything in the data sheet about the political stances of the respondents, I'll mention it on a comment, and a pinned comment, or in the description. Anyway, so that's all for this. Do let me know what you think about my idea. If it's a horrible idea, or if it's a interesting idea, or if you think it's a good idea. And feel free to check out the poll. Although there's not much to it, to be honest. But if you want to read over it, it's always worth it. Anyway, till next time.